Welcome friends, Ben here, joined by Adam.
Hello.
Hello mate, how you doing?
Not bad, yourself?
Good, yeah, good, thank you mate, good. We've got together today to talk about Ghost of Tsushima, 1 year on from its release in 2020. I think both of us, Adam, played a lot of Ghost of Tsushima, so much so that we both platinumed it.
Did I platinum it? I need to check now.
I'm pretty sure you did. Didn't we have a discussion about the little outfit that you get once you've done everything, and the multicoloured outfit that you get for
quite possible. I mean, I finished the story. So we played so much of this game, and then I'm like, no. Oh, I do have the platinum for it. Yeah.
Perfect. So
would have been nice to remember that, but here we go.
That's okay. It was a whole year ago, so you know, it's a game that we've you and I have talked about a couple of times before. There's episodes of the Tanked Up podcast which you came onto last summer when we were both kind of playing through the game. And we kind of chatted about initial impressions and those sorts of things. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on our kind of impressions of the game from a year on, any lasting sort of memories of it, and how we think it's going to kind of go in the future with the announcement currently that we have about the director's cut, which will be coming out. And we may get into the idea about the upgrade paths and all of that sort of stuff as well as we chat about it.
Yeah, and the expansion.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
Absolutely.
With you mentioning talking about it on Tanked Up, we talked a little bit about it when I was recently on as well. When you mentioned about how you're feeling about open world games in general.
Yes.
And Ghost of Tsushima is one of the games that I talked about as being a good example of one in the way that it immerses you in its open world. It's not. The word I'm looking for. It's not groundbreaking in the structure of it. It is very much in that sort of quote-unquote Ubisoft style where you have the encampments and kind of tower-like stuff and the collection and that sort of idea. But it is groundbreaking in the way that it presents that to you through things like having the guiding wind and, you know, how it's graphically, how they put it together and things like that to denote the different areas and stuff. Like one of the very first places you go to and when you get into the open world is the Golden Temple kind of area, the Golden Forest.
Yes.
And that is just stunning right from the start, because you go from kind of rushing through kind of open grassland with the kind of white flowers and stuff on it towards the tree line, and it's just all golden trees and stuff, and it just looks incredible, and the entire map is just filled with those kinds of areas and those kinds of transitions where you go, right, I know I'm definitely over in this part of the map, or I know I'm definitely over in that part of the map. You know, as you explore more, you build that map up in your head, and because of the guiding wind and stuff like that, you don't spend as much time stopping and checking the map in the menu, stopping and checking the map in the menu. You stop, you decide where you're going, you place the marker, and then you just use the wind to just go, and it works perfectly in that regard.
It does, and it does a lot of other sort of stuff around sort of almost not quite emergent gameplay, but almost. You're signposted quite well to things just as you're traversing the world. And I think that is one of the lasting impressions that the game gave me, was we were in this kind of space where there was the Ubisoft approach, and we had other games like something like Horizon Zero Dawn, which had kind of taken that and tried to play about with it a little bit. And Tsushima kind of feels like almost a half step towards the sort of the next kind of big change that open world games will kind of take. And it's the idea, you know, you get near something and suddenly the little fox will appear and will take you off to a shrine somewhere, or you'll come across, you know, the random kind of bandits or Mongols out on the roads and the pathways and things, which aren't always necessarily kind of in those spaces. So it takes, as you say, takes things from certain games. You know, you can see some of the DNA of The Witcher 3. You can see some of the DNA of other Ubisoft games, maybe sort of more like Assassin's Creed style titles.
Yeah, it's definitely the kind of foundation that they've used to build on. In the same way that like the Spider-Man game takes from Insomniac takes the Ubisoft styling
Mm,
and sort of does the best possible version of that by making moving between all of the areas really fun with
yeah.
the traversal and stuff like that. And that's probably the best, most polished version of the Ubisoft style that
Mm,
you can make. And as you say, this feels like the half step towards the breakthrough into what does open world games mean, in the future, because it's that extra layer of immersion that you get from how they've crafted all of those different mechanics and all the side stuff, like you were saying, like it takes you to a shrine, or the wee sparrow comes down out of the trees and leads you off towards like doing the haikus, or
mm.
like the spring baths and the hot springs and that sort of thing. Uh, and none of that feels as intrusive as 5,000 markers on a map
Yep. Yeah.
tends to, because the way it structures them, they're not they're not essential, but they feel more essential to the game because they feel so much more in line with the experience.
Hmm.
Whereas, oh, you've got these dozen other markers for things that you could go look at if you want, and you're, but do I want to do that?
Yes. Yeah.
But
Very
do I
much.
need to do that? Whereas when the sparrow appears, you think, oh, where's this going to take me?
Mm.
And it just kind of leads you in that way.
Yeah, like
Uh,
I think all of the sort of the side stuff and the things you can do in the world were, whilst they weren't essential, they were beneficial.
yeah,
But they were kind of also unique. It wasn't just go here, collect thing, go here, collect thing. You had certain elements to them. So even just the shrines. You go to a shrine, you high five the fox, and you're kind of on your way again. But
yeah,
a lot of those shrines were kind of semi kind of platformy. You had to jump
yeah,
across some rocks or move through some of the landscape to get towards. It wasn't just here is thing, you now have thing. You had a little
yeah,
bit of gameplay to actually get to those kinds of things. And the cutting of the bamboo, even though
yeah,
that's sort of like quick time event, I really liked that just as a change of pace to sort of everything else that was kind of going on, and it really sort of showed you almost how you were progressing as well, skill wise, in the game. That these got progressively harder, and suddenly you're bashing like 6 or 7 buttons in very quick succession to
yeah.
slice through all of those big bamboo reeds.
If it wasn't in, an 18 plus or 16 plus game, I would recommend it as a way of teaching people the muscle memory of pushing different buttons. It's because it's one of those that if you lifted just that out into its own wee menu somewhere to load them all up, that is a really interesting, because some of them are bloody difficult.
Yeah.
And I've been playing games for so long that I don't really remember a time when I haven't been, and even I was going, some of these don't, some of the button combinations felt very natural from a lot of other games and just experience, and some of them were very deliberately, no, we're making you push a button that feels out of sequence because you've been playing, action games for 20 odd years.
Yeah.
So you know how this is meant to go, but we've thrown an extra triangle in there just to really annoy you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
completely,
and things
completely.
like that. So it's almost a handy training tool if you were struggling, or if you were doing rehab or something. It would be good for that.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing it didn't lean into for me quite enough were the one-on-one duels. So that they were around. There was some
Yeah,
about that kind of also led you. I think there was a quest where you had maybe 5 or 6 duels for an armor
yeah,
set.
yeah.
But
That's one of the kind of side missions that kind of pops up. I think you're right. There is as you say, there isn't enough of them
yeah,
because there is only the kind of 5 or 6, and then like a boss one, and then there's some that crop up in the story mode as well, in the story missions. So those side ones are quite handy for teaching you how those work, so that you can do them a lot better in the, when you encounter them in the story.
hmm
Um, but yeah, could have done with some more of that. One of the mechanics I really like is the standoff.
yes,
When you encounter a group of enemies, you can basically go "Ho!" and they just have to come towards you, and you just hold triangle, and you stand in front of them, and there's this, Mexican standoff. It's tense. You're looking at one another, and the first person who moves is in the wrong. You have to wait. You have to hold your nerve and let them actually attack you first. And when you first come across it, it doesn't really throw many tricks your way. But by the time you get to the end of the game, they're throwing in multiple feints and we movements and the animations and stuff like that, where before they would have went, they don't, and then you end up getting clobbered. But when you get it right, you can cut through quite a few enemies in a single stroke.
Absolutely.
And if you use one of the right armor sets and stuff like that, and unlock the abilities in it, you can cut through a heck of a lot of them.
Yeah, yeah.
You can like you were saying, you can encounter the like trains of enemies that are out, like gathering materials or whatever they're doing or patrolling, and you can kill all of them using just the standoff mechanic, and but if you get it wrong, you end up with like this much health.
Yeah, then you're in some trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very high risk, high reward mechanic in that way, but I love they included it because it's something you don't get a lot of, particularly in a game that has a lot of Assassin's Creed style stealth mechanics and things in it. It still gives you the honorable path, the samurai way of you just yell at your enemy to face you so you can kill him in an honorable fight.
Yeah, very much. And I think that's, again, something that the game does quite well. When you were saying about these sort of, with the standoff, that they don't throw many tricks at you, and they progressively do sort of through the game as it gets harder, I think it does very well at not just being, here is enemy type 1, here is enemy type 2, here is enemy type 3, they're now just a harder version,
Yeah.
It feels like they progress with you. It doesn't just feel like, oh, these people now they just have more hit points. You at times you are swarmed with them, and actually tactically they kind of figure stuff out as well and seem to know not how to counter you necessarily, but they just seem a little bit more switched on in the later parts of the game. Like, and it's not that kind of, maybe it is. Maybe they've got this program in place where the AI has kind of learnt what you're doing, and it feels like sometimes, if you very much go in and you do a standoff with everybody, you then throw a smoke bomb down, and you utilize kind of the tools that you have with you. It feels like they know what you are going to be doing, so they can adjust for that a little bit, and they might not quite come as close to you. They might back off a little bit more and sort of sit back and wait for you to come towards them, even though you know that you like that more kind of ranged and you throw bombs and those sorts of things. And it just feels like the enemies progress very naturally within the game as you get stronger and get more tools and those sorts of things.
Yeah, it is one of those that I don't know how much of that is the game reacting to you as a player, and how much of it is built into the progression as you're going through the stories and the levels and as such. But whatever it's doing, whether it's prescripted or whether it's doing it naturally based on what you're doing, it's very clever in the way that it's either tricking you or not tricking you into believing it's doing that.
Yeah.
Depending on what's happening, but you're right, because so many games fall into the trap of, well, they just have more health. You do more damage, but they just have more health, which is, there's a little bit of that with some of the enemies, but not a huge amount. Because, as I say, like, it's partly an immersion thing again. You're using, the katana and stuff like that. Weapon that is very famously very good at killing things with. It's famously very sharp, and so it's supposed to feel deadly all of the time, and the game does a brilliant job of making it feel deadly, whether you're the one using it or whether you're defending against it, from the start of the game to the end of the game, without feeling the same. As you say, you unlock some more tricks, with your smoke bombs and like throwing knives and stuff, and some more abilities and things to do with the sword as well. But also, the enemies come up with new ways of counteracting you. As you say, like, sometimes they start backing off and trying to let their archers get you a bit better. Sometimes you'll see them trying to group up and gather more enemies together to try and mob you a bit more, because they're trying to overwhelm you before you can just cut through them all.
Yep.
And those things. And you're right, the progression is very finely tuned in that way that it does feel very natural. It does feel like, when some of them have escaped you for whatever reason and gone back and told everyone else, look, this guy is running about and jumping out of these bushes and throwing bombs at people and doing all this weird stuff and killing everybody. We need to deal with this. And it does feel like they've gathered together somewhere and gone, right, so the next time something happens, this is the plan. And then when that fails, they go back to a different camp and, it starts all over again. So it does feel like you're getting that back and forth as you would. They would learn, right, they seem to keep sneaking in and setting fire to stuff, so we'll put in things to counteract that, or he keeps distracting us with these stupid wind chimes and stuff, so we'll stop doing what, and all these sort of things. As you say, that they react very well to it, and it does. It's so underrated, making something feel dangerous and deadly the whole way through the game in the way that it does, because it's one of those. I've never been very big on like the Soul style of games, because I'm just not interested in banging my head against that wall in that way. I admire them from afar. They're very beautifully crafted and designed games, and the fine tuning that goes into making them just frustrating enough without feeling unfair, because it's very finely tuned.
Yeah.
And a lot of games either swing too far into that, but don't have that same kind of fanatical attention to detail that makes From Software games work in that way. So a lot of the copies don't quite nail it in the same way, and other games go too far the other way, and you end up feeling a little bit too powerful too early.
Yes.
And by the time you get to the end of the game, you're starting to think, oh, more enemies, great. And I never had that in this. I never had that in the likes of The Witcher, which is another game that does this very well. And it is entirely down to they've taken what makes sense in the world that they've created and the time period that they're what's the word I want? The time period they're predicting. No, that doesn't sound right.
Illustrating?
That's not the word I was looking for, but that will do. Illustrate the world that they're depicting. That's the word.
Nice.
They're depicting, a time period and a place. The Mongol invasion of the island of Tsushima, and everything that they do in terms of the gameplay and the design is fitted around making that feel as real as possible. So yeah, a samurai wandering about with a katana would be dangerous, whether he's wearing loads of armor and has 10,000 smoke bombs, or whether he has nothing but the katana. He's always dangerous if he gets close enough to you, and it plays with that very well, because at the same time, if you're going up against someone holding one, they feel bloody dangerous as well. So but it never crosses into feeling too difficult in the way that, like, I would find the Souls games frustrating. It still gives you just enough leeway where you can take a couple of hits and you can find ways of bailing yourself out of trouble in a way that those games maybe wouldn't allow, before kind of healing yourself up and coming back into a fight with a few less enemies because you've already had a few rounds at them.
Yeah, it does that very well. Like retreat being part of the strategy is built into this, and it makes sense for the style of game that it is. That is it. It's not just right. You're locked into this area now, and you have to just beat it. You can just run away and come back either later on, or as you say, just heal up and kind of go back into it. But it does a good thing about sort of reinforcing areas if you don't clear them out, and those kinds of things as well. So it feels again like it's this maybe not living world, but it has some kind of life to it, that it isn't just static. There's 10 enemies here. Once those 10 enemies are gone, that's it. You know, they will repopulate areas, and more enemies will be kind of out on the roads and things. So it does feel, and without me ever having visited Tsushima or Japan, it feels authentic in what it's trying to depict, as you say.
Yeah, and it also, as you say, it's obviously not quite a living world in the fullest sense, but it also doesn't feel like, oh, there's these 10 enemies in this spot, and when you come back, there's just 10 enemies in this exact
Yeah,
same spot doing the
yeah.
exact same thing. It doesn't do that either. It does feel like when you come across enemies, it does feel like you've stumbled across them in the middle of whatever they're kind of supposed to be doing,
Mm,
whether they're patrolling or delivering supplies to a camp somewhere down the road or whatever. It does feel like you're interrupting them in the middle of their job,
yeah.
and they do react to you. And the other thing as well that it does a very good job of weaving in thematically into the story and things like that. The fact that it does have these quote unquote dishonorable ways of doing
Mm,
everything. So that they've added in the stealth mechanics, and as it unlock, you go from essentially being just your straight laced samurai down the path of, well, if I'm going to be winning this battle here, I need to be a bit more than that, and I need to have a few more tricks up my sleeve,
hmm
and it deals with that within the story of the game as well as in the gameplay. It's not. There's a couple of kind of clashes between, thematically wants to make a big deal of the fact that you've, kind of stabbed an enemy in the back, which is very dishonorable for a
mm,
samurai to be doing, and then you do it another 5 times before the end of that section of the game. And it doesn't feel like such a big deal anymore.
completely. Yeah.
But it does deal with the fact that as you're going down this path of using smoke bombs and jumping out of bushes to kill people and things like that, it doesn't ignore that change in the game. It doesn't still treat you as simply an honorable samurai.
Yes, very
It
much.
it get it it enables you to be both. It gives you the option to do both, and you can play the game, as very much as the straight up person as much as you want.
Hmm
Excuse me. Um, you might find that a bit more difficult, and it definitely encourages you to be a bit more. Oh well, this fight isn't going as well as I would hope. Here, have a knife to the eye.
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
And
Yeah.
it encourages both, but it allows you to play. It allows you to role play it the way that you want to kind of take the character. Although it does lead you down that path of opening up all these extra opportunities to be, quote unquote, dishonorable.
hmm hmm And I think that's definitely its strength within that kind of world building, and the way that you interact and move through that space is I think the biggest selling point for this. I was going to say let's jump into kind of memorable moments about the story and things like that, but I think for me there aren't a huge amount of kind of big impactful moments in the story in terms of them kind of like staying with me to be able to sort of pull from. There is the storyline with the Straw Hats and how the leader was
Yeah,
kind of your childhood friend, and
yeah,
that felt good in terms of how they wove that into sort of like the main story and the climax of that kind of thing. But I think for me with the story, it just kind of pushed me through different areas kind of in the world. It was like, right, you've done this bit now, here's the next area. You've done this bit now, here's the final sort of third of
yeah,
the island.
yeah. It's one of those that it's not a groundbreaking story in any way.
Mm.
It's a very well crafted and told story,
hmm
because it does take you through the childhood friend that turns out to not be so friendly, and it goes into all those kind of the conflicts that arise through the various kind of changes that go on, in the same way that it deal it deals very well with like the mentor mentee kind of divide,
Yeah.
and the your character Jin, having seen what happened when they tried to fight the Mongols the traditional way, and got their asses kicked, and felt, through his very real experience, that they need to be doing a bit more that maybe they're not going to be writing home about as such, but is necessary to make sure that they get rid of the Mongols, because that's ultimately the plan. Whereas his uncle, Lord Shimura, continues down the, no, we're samurai, we win this the samurai way or we don't win, accepting kind of both options as, acceptable conclusions to the story, whereas Jin very much goes down the only acceptable option is winning and getting rid of the Mongols. Yeah. And the conflict and how they resolve all of that and pull it together is very beautifully done, because you can see both kind of sides. You can see why Lord Shimura goes down that path of, no, we do it our way or no way at all, because not doing it our way is just as bad as letting them kill us anyway, sort of thing. It's to him it's the same, and Jin doesn't see it that way. And it's very interesting kind of examining that, and you get good glimpses into them both struggling with the fact that the other person doesn't agree with them. And it weaves it together very, very well. But yeah, as for memorable moments, apart from, I think, the ending, which I suppose probably shouldn't spoil as such, I think it's more just, it's things like the very beginning of the game when you go to like the Golden Temple. That's the first place I went to in the game. That's kind of just following kind of the paths, and that's kind of where I ended up, even though the game doesn't really lead you there as such. It's those kind of experiences of kind of turning a corner or going, around the hill and going, wow, it's a very beautiful looking game, and
yes,
a lot of the experiences come from that. But yeah, I think that the other memorable moment would probably be another spoiler.
Well, I mean, we are a year on. I think maybe we can,
but it's a big moment. I don't want to ruin it for anyone.
Okay. That's fair. Especially,
it was very emotionally impactful to me after. Let's just say there's a reason why they have you name things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was very impactful.
Okay, I know what you mean.
It's kind of daft and tertiary as it seems a lot of the time. That was very much it. I got to that bit and I went, that fucking bastard. And then it's like 5 minutes further down the road while I'm still, upset about it. And I go, so that is why they have you do that. And, now I understand. That is cruel and evil, sucker punch.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
It worked a treat. Anyone who's played it like that far will know exactly what we're talking about.
Talking about playing it and new people coming into it. So the game is now having a new version be released, the director's cut, which is going to add some additional content. There is going to be Iki Island, which is a completely new area that you can go to. That I think, from what I've read, even if you finish the game, we could go back into the world and then go and do that. It's not kind of an inserted, element kind of on the story or anything like that. It's not like a director's cut in terms of like a film, and like Kojima's been talking about with the Death Stranding director's cut and the naming convention of that. I don't think this is suddenly we had to cut this out, but actually we've now put it in as a progression through the story as such. It is a new area that you can kind of go to and do, and there's other things that they're throwing into this kind of version as well. And it's coming to PlayStation 5, and you can upgrade the PS4 version to the director's cut version for a certain amount of money. You can then upgrade to the PS5 version for a certain amount of money, and there's different sort of tiers about how you can kind of do that. But this seems like a good place for anyone who hasn't experienced the game to not worry about the standard version now and just wait for the release of this director's cut to kind of come out, because yes, it's probably a little bit more money than if you just bought the standard game and then wanted to upgrade kind of later on to just wait. But getting that extra content, I think, at least for me now, having platinumed it, and I don't feel like I would go back to sort of say like a New Game Plus version of it. I do want more. So a nice, tidy X amount of hours DLC, new area, seems perfect for me to get back into, but also a new release for others to then experience it with.
Yeah, I've been planning to play the New Game Plus since I finished the game, pretty much, and thought, no, I'll come back to this at some point. Because I know that New Game Plus is something they added a few months after, which is quite common these days. That seems to be part of their post-release update plans. Tends to be one of the things that they add is the New Game Plus to games, which is something I'm all for, because when you do love a game, there's nothing better than going back through it with all the tips and tricks unlocked that you've had to grind through the first time around. It does feel like a nice kind of reward for enjoying the game so much that you got to the end.
Yeah.
If you feel like you really want more, that's a good way of getting it, because it feels like a fresh experience having all of your abilities unlocked and whatever else. Plus any new stuff that they add in for that version, if there is indeed anything. But yeah, I think the way I would split it is, if you have a PlayStation 5 or are getting one very soon, which is unlikely, I know, but if you're getting one very soon, wait for the director's cut, because that's going to have your the update that adds all of the the fancy haptic feedback and whatever else that gets the most out of that, and obviously the expansion. But if you're just on PS4, probably just buy it now.
Okay.
I mean, you get access to the standard edition straight away anyway, I'm pretty sure, if you buy what, there is a version where you can do that, where it just gives you access to the version that's out now anyway.
Oh,
so that you can,
is there? Oh, amazing. Okay.
Yeah, so you'd be able to play, so you're only paying for the one package, but
Yeah.
you'd be able to play the full game that's out now and then get to the DLC when it comes out.
That just automatically unlocks for you when it drops.
Yeah, but there's too many versions. I can't remember which one is which. This is a problem that they need to deal with.
Yep.
At the very least, they need to be streamlining this down a bit. Preferably just the PS4 and PS5 versions. That would be easier, but whatever. That's a different topic for a different video at some point. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having another area to explore. I'm going to be interested to see, as you say, it's added in. I think it becomes available in like the second act of the story. I think is what they said, if you were starting fresh. Yeah, but it is obviously, it's a separate island. It's going to have its own story elements. I don't think there's any crossover characters from what they've said, other than Jin, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what they do with that, because Iki Island was also invaded at the time, but there's also a second Mongol invasion of some of the islands that happens, a few years after the events that take place in Ghost of Tsushima. Then I was thinking that that's maybe what they would be doing for the sequel. But,
yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, because it's one of those, you don't need to do the island of Tsushima again, but I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember off the top of my head which islands it was that gets invaded again, and kind of relative sizes and things of them to make what would make more sense from a game design point of view. Because if it's not kind of the same size or roughly the same as Tsushima, you wouldn't move to a different island as such.
Well, could they take, say, a sequel? So we're now getting Iki Island as well. If you want to experience a little bit more of Ghost of Tsushima, you can do, with the DLC coming out, which is fantastic for people who really enjoyed the game. I'm definitely going to get it. Yeah. I'm going to jump back into it and play that through. But with a sequel, rather than them sticking with, rather than them calling it sort of Ghost of Tsushima 2, do they take kind of the approach that Horizon have done with its naming convention? Horizon Zero Dawn came out, you played through an area. Horizon isn't Horizon Zero Dawn 2 working around a similar kind of area. It is Horizon Forbidden West, moving you across the country, moving you to the west coast of America. Maybe they would look at doing something like Ghost of Kyoto, or putting you in a very different place, taking Jin to kind of what they were calling sort of like the mainland, and one of the bigger islands of Japan, and or taking you somewhere else, but keeping the Ghost of name element, but throwing in a different location to tell you that you're going to be somewhere else. This is then Jin 10 years on, or whatever, kind of progressing his story to that next important, rather than saying, well, here's the second wave of the Mongol invasion. It's a similar kind of thing with a bit more refined mechanics and more of what you want kind of through the world, perhaps.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because, well, obviously we're crossing a console generation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it had all been on PS4, I would have said they would probably go down the more, maybe not call it that, but go down more the Ghost of Tsushima 2 route of, it's new content built on the same, the same kind of technology and stuff, and with some refinements. Just because they cost a lot of money to make, and they do a heck of a lot of research and stuff, which is very evident in Ghost of Tsushima. They do all that work, and if they can get 2 uses out of it, that would probably help quite a lot on the cost front.
Yeah.
A bit like like Spider-Man Miles Morales being, it's a tweaked version of the same map and technology and everything else, and then you get maybe kind of your 2 hits out as much as possible, and then move on to here's the next version of that. And it is interesting to think, because they have plenty of options, because they can do the Mongols invade another part of Japan with Jin. They can have Jin as the ghost heads off into China or wherever and gets all up in the Mongols' business.
Yeah.
Or they could go down a slightly more Assassin's Creed-ish kind of route and take the ghost of somewhere else in a different time period and a different character that doesn't have a overarching genetic link or any crazy nonsense and BS like that. But they could just do, well, here's another character going through some stuff in a place that fits kind of, that has some kind of thematic link and how they're going about doing it, because everything is all about the franchise these days, isn't it? So having another one that the ghost of whatever kind of trying to think of an example, and I don't have one off the top of my head that would suit, but it is interesting to think of the possibilities, because they do have the Mongols tried to invade Japan a couple of times. They also invaded different islands and different areas. There's also the fact that the Mongols invaded pretty much everywhere else in the planet.
Yes, very true. Yep.
So you could do ghosts of Kazakhstan, or ghosts of India, or there is plenty of options available to you in that front if you're going to stick with the Mongols being antagonists. They give you plenty of options.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe, I don't know, Ghost of Gaul up against the Romans. Like, there's plenty of options that fit that kind of broad mold of historically massive empire trying to invade place where it doesn't go so well for various reasons, and you as a player character may well be that reason.
Yes.
There's plenty of options available to you for games in that kind of mold, so I'm interested to see what they do with it, because
absolutely.
If they do such good work as they did on this one, they will all be excellent regardless of where they go with it. It's a big F, but it's there.
I completely agree. Ghost of Tsushima has a that kind of PlayStation exclusive level of quality to it. It is one of those games which kind of sits right up at the top of quality, and some of that is to do with the way that PlayStation fund their studios and the budgets that they will kind of have for these kinds of things, but also the way that sort of the worldwide studios kind of work together as well and bounce ideas off each other, use other technologies, and that sort of thing, working more as a kind of a worldwide team across all of these studios. So it'd be interesting to see what influence they then take from kind of the other studios and what they've done with things, as well as sort of third parties, with Ubisoft taking Assassin's Creed and going, well, we did the formation in the Middle East, a lot around Jerusalem and stuff. We then went to Ezio, and we were in Italy for a big period of time, and then progressively moving it through the ages, and now producing games which don't kind of fit with the original scope of what they did, and bouncing around kind of all over the place.
Now they've gone, we heard you like big, so how about Infinite? Yeah. That's their next thing that they're doing with Assassin's Creed, which feels very not what I enjoyed about those games when I was playing them. As you said, kind of back in the original kind of iteration of them. But Ubisoft aside, I'm interested to see what they do with it, because we do want to see, people break away from the model of open world games that they've pioneered and defined for so long, that kind of defined the last 10 years, maybe more. Probably more than 10 years. 15, something like that. Everyone is very much looking forward to breaking away from that mold that they've kind of set as good as it has been at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. But you're right that with the first party studios as well, they do have that extra layer of quality on them. Sony are doing a good job in that regard of turning their first parties and putting them in the same kind of bracket as the Nintendo ones. It's the first party games on the Nintendo consoles that everyone thinks about and talks about. They are the kind of the gold standards for what you expect from their consoles, is what they can do in those games. And Sony are doing a good job of showing off their stuff in the same kind of vein with what their first parties offer, because like the fact that Ghost of Tsushima works on PS4 without my launch PS4 no less, without it A, blowing up, B, catching fire, or C, taking 10 years to load, is insanely impressive, because it's very quick loading.
It is.
So
I remember
beautiful,
that.
And you think it should not be possible.
Yeah, completely.
But they've managed to find a way.
Yeah, I remember the story coming out where suddenly there was a suggestion made that they actually paused the loading in to give you those tips screens, because otherwise they wouldn't have had anywhere to put those. But I don't know whether it was Sucker Punch or whether it was another part of the worldwide studios or some support team who actually then brought that in and wrote something which allowed them to have such short kind of load times. And it'd be great to see how that then affects all of these other ones. Then they take that element that's been developed and put it into all of these into these other games as well. So especially with the PlayStation 5 now.
Yeah, I mean the SSD and the next generation stuff was going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on that, but the bog standard hard drive of the the original PS4 and all that, the fact that it loads so quickly is just, I struggle to believe it if I didn't see it for myself.
Yeah.
In the same way that SSDs load dead fast doesn't sound that impressive until you watch it happen. Like when the kind of leaked footage of the Spider-Man demo originally appeared, and it showed you the PS4 version loading and the PS5 version loading. The PS5 version loaded, like that, and the PS4 version was still a few seconds behind, and you're like, all right, okay, that is, that looks legit. That I believe in it now. So they're doing a good job on that front anyway with their first party studios. So I look forward to seeing Sucker Punch back in 4 to 5 years.
Yes,
with their next game after this expansion.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe you've got to think they've been working on whatever the next kind of title is, at least in the early sort of development stages for the last year. Main team wise, or working on another game, perhaps. He's putting out something else.
Most of the studios these days have, like the big ones have at least 2 teams usually running in some capacity.
Yeah,
as you say, maybe one team is, on a much smaller scale, but is working away on whatever it is, and then everyone shifts over, and then the next project team then starts brainstorming whatever they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being a bit harsh.
Well, stuff seems to turn around a little bit quicker these days as well. You think of like the God of War sort of cycle that only came out in 3 years ago, 2018. So again, we've got something which is suggested, Ragnarok suggested coming out next year. So that's a 4-year cycle. And even with that console jump as well, Horizon again, 2018 or was that 2017 game? Ooh, or was it even further than that? I don't remember. But it feels like these cycles are a little bit quicker these days in terms of being about 4 years or something like that. So hopefully, maybe you look at 2024 perhaps for whatever the new title from Sucker Punch will be.
Well, we'll find out which one of us has a working crystal ball eventually.
I mean, we might even have PlayStation 5s by then. Who knows? But we shall see.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Your crystal ball is definitely broken if you believe that.
Brilliant. Amazing. So, any final thoughts, Adam, on Ghost of Tsushima at all?
Go play it if you haven't already. And I don't think we spoiled anything too
not
significant story-wise, so you don't need to worry about any of that. Just go enjoy it because it is worth experiencing.
Absolutely. It's a solid open world game, which takes the sort of the standard, and as we said at the beginning, is kind of that half step up. So it feels fresh. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. So that is our little chat on Ghost of Tsushima 1 year on. I'm sure we'll return when the Iki Island DLC releases and have a little chat about that, and we will come back to you when we know what Sucker Punch are up to next as well.
Probably see you in 5 years.
3, 5, done. We'll see how quickly we appear back on your screens again. Go to all of the places that Out of Lives inhabit to chat to us and let us know, what do you think of Ghost of Tsushima? Are you going to be picking up the DLC to jump back into it, or have you just been playing New Game Plus as well and reliving that story and that world since its release, or since you first completed it perhaps? Well, let us know if you didn't complete it and why. That'd be really good to get to know as well. So we are Out of Lives Net almost everywhere, over on Twitter, www.outoflives.net as well, and subscribe, like, and all that sort of stuff here on our YouTube channel to keep up with what we are doing. Again, thank you, Adam, and I will catch you very soon.
Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Cheers, everyone.
www.outoflives.net